Guys, it's been a terrifying Halloween so far for me.
Has it?
Uh, Lots of scares and
Oh,
lots of
So
really?
nonsense.
many?
Yes, so many scares. Because I haven't just been watching the movies that we've been watching. I've been trying to watch some other movies as well.
Right.
Sure, sure.
Yes.
Such as?
Yeah.
The
What?
Flash, that was terrifying,
Oh,
terrifyingly
that's
awful.
You finally made it to the Flash, huh?
Did watch the Flash.
that's a horror movie for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as I was led to believe, but was still
Ah.
bad. Was still bad. That's the key qualifier there. Yeah. So and then I also watched Knock at the Cabin.
Oh yeah, the M
Oh,
Night Shyamalan movie from earlier this year.
I feel like that movie has gotten worse with memory.
Oh.
I
Well, what did
liked
you
it.
think
I
then?
think I liked
Or-
it at the time, and then as I've seen other movies, I think it's just been like, oh, that just came out in February.
Yeah,
True.
yeah. It had the early to the it had the like first to the bowl kind of bias where you're like, hey, what a great first movie. I liked it. I've liked it well enough. I do think you're conditioned to expect a twist
Right.
with M Night Shyamalan. And the twist here was that there really was no twist. That it was kind of, if you figured it out in the first 10 minutes, you figured it out. There was nothing else to figure out, So I appreciated that level of it. It didn't try to surprise me. At the same time, it was the performances that really elevated it. It was Dave Bautista. It was Jonathan. Is it Jonathan Groff? Is that his name?
I believe so. I do remember
you
the
know,
performances being good. Dave Bautista
Yeah.
was quite good.
Yeah, and so they were all fantastic. That really elevated it, I think, for me in a lot of ways. Have you guys been watching anything else the last few weeks?
Josh?
Yeah, I've watched some things. I haven't watched a lot of horror outside of the show, unfortunately. I've been trying to, but I just haven't really. I don't know. I don't think it's the spooky season hit me as hard. This
I agree
time
with
as
that.
it
I think it's
usually
because
does.
it's been like too damn hot. It's too damn hot for the
maybe
spooky
that's
season.
because it just doesn't feel like a real spooky season. So
The pumpkins are
and
melting.
I'm running out of time, unfortunately. I gotta I have some favorites I try to watch every year that I need to get to. But I did go see Killers of the Flower Moon over the weekend, and
Big time movie.
I don't want to
Big
do a
time
whole
movie.
breakdown of it because I feel like potentially we might talk about it on the show down the line somewhere again. But I will say that it's really good. It may have exceeded my expectations in a lot of ways. I was really hesitant of the 3.5 hour runtime, and I gotta say, I didn't feel it as much as I was afraid I would. It's
good.
paced pretty well, and a lot is packed in to the story all throughout. So it does feel like pretty much every minute is earned. So if that is a concern for you, that's my experience. That maybe if you're open to it, it won't be quite as distracting. I did have to get up and go to the bathroom. That's normal for me in most movies, though.
Run
2.5
P,
or
endorsed
3.5.
but not sponsored by.
Yes,
Yeah.
Run P is a great app. It'll tell you when to go. But a quick rundown. I can only speak on this movie from the perspective of a guy who doesn't know a lot about the history of this story because of the nature of how it was hidden. I'm not part of the Osage culture, so I can't speak for any of that, and I wouldn't try. But I will say I think that considering this is a movie told by a white man, Martin Scorsese, he does a pretty good job with it. This movie was rewritten at one point after the Osage Nation started to help more, and the original version focused on Jesse Plemons' character, who is the FBI agent who is sent to Osage County, and now this version of the movie centers around Ernest Burkhart and Molly Burkhart, and the Jesse Plemons character doesn't even show up for a very long time, to be honest with you. So it was a massive change to incorporate what the Osage Nation wanted to see in this movie, and I think that's really good. Performances are great. What everyone is saying, I think is true. Maybe Leo's best. Lily Gladstone is probably a lock for a lot of awards. And then just the supporting cast. It's fun to see Brendan Fraser on screen again. Jesse Plemons is great. He's one of our best right now, I think. Overall, really good. I don't have a lot of complaints about it from my point of view.
So you're not in the camp of Brendan Fraser needs to get back his Oscar.
I saw that going around. Really just from one source.
Yeah.
But not only is that a laughable idea to suggest that because you think one performer's performance in a movie was bad that he should return an Oscar for a different performance. But I genuinely was shocked to find that anyone thought Brendan was bad in Killers of the Flower Moon. That never even occurred to me. I thought he was fantastic as usual.
People just want to hate.
I guess he's a smaller part, but he's great with what he does. So no, I don't think Brendan should give back his Oscar because some dork on the Daily Beast didn't like his role in Killers of the Flower Moon. But that's it.
I haven't seen it yet. Obviously, it's on my list. We have a lot of connections to it. Will our friend and former host be on the short list for Best Supporting Actor? Andrew Nichols, of course.
Yeah. Could you find that bum Andrew Nichols?
I could tell you that I saw Andrew Nichols in that movie.
That's
We'd
great.
love to hear it. We love
It is
to
awesome.
hear it.
He's very excited about it. He has seen it twice already.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was like, "Look for me here," and I was like, "Oh my!"
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask him what how far he said somewhere near the beginning.
I do think it needs to be pointed out, or you'll miss it because it's not like a super close up of him. But
is it in the scene?
Enough warning, you can go, "Oh, that is Andrew." Okay.
Is it in the scene with all the cars? Like the race, like some kind of race is going on.
Yes.
Because he posted a photo of himself from some of the screenshots of not screenshots, but some of the set photos. And there's a scene where all these like colorful cars racing or doing something, and he's like running right behind one of them. And I'm like, well, if there's any moment you're going to see Andrew Nichols, it's got to be that scene right there.
Yeah, and it is. I want to say, if I remember it correctly, it's like kind of a zoom out drone shot, and you see him running from above.
I can't wait.
I was like, oh my god!
Yeah.
And according to him, he's in another scene later, but I didn't see him there. So he'll have to show me that one.
Yeah, we'll have to find it.
Yeah, friend of the show.
I Spy with My Little Eye. Andrew.
But it's good. I do highly recommend everybody see it.
Yeah.
The anticipation has been worth it. It's a really good movie, and I hope, if anything, it just opens up more people to this history so they can learn more about it. There's a really great moment in the film where the people who are suffering these murders are also watching a newsreel footage reporting on the Tulsa Race Massacre that is happening at the same time. And people don't talk about that either. Like, this was a bit of an epidemic in this part of the country at the time, apparently. Because much like Greenwood, the Osage Nation was wealthy. And they drove fancy cars and wore fancy clothes. And the people the white people at that time couldn't take that. And so that's the story. And seeing them tied together was super powerful to me.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that it's good. I definitely want to see it. It's on my list. And
Yeah, I got to carve out a couple hours because I have to assume.
Or if you go to the movie theater, because trailers and all that.
Trailers, adds to it, and I'm not against necessarily a long film. I've seen a lot of movies that have hit that 3-hour mark over the last couple of years, but when you add the trailers, you add the commute. Because it's going to be about, for me, if I go to somewhere in Tulsa, that's going to be about a 25-minute trip there and back, or almost an hour there and back between the two. And Nikki's already decided she's just good to wait for it to appear on Apple,
and that's fine too. I think I get that.
And
I just hope that I hope that if you don't want to wait for it in theaters, that people will at least give it a chance at home.
Yeah, and that's why I need to find I have to pay back that 5 hours somewhere.
Yeah.
somewhere with.
But before we
with
move on, I know Garrett's been watching some stuff too. What have you been catching up on horror-wise?
You know, the most recent, actually, I watched it. I haven't watched much this week, but I did forget one that I watched last week,
Okay.
which might tell you a few things. It was the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh,
Without Sarah Jessica Parker, or not
The
Sarah Jessica
one
Parker,
with-
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
I already don't remember her name. I apologize. You know, I liked that movie a lot growing up. I really enjoyed it. I liked it.
Really?
Yeah, it was one that it's again kind of a movie that I watched with my sister and like when we were off school or something, and we would watch her birthday was in October, and I feel like we would watch that sometime around there. And so I have positive memories of it, nostalgia. It's not great though. Performances are pretty bad. But it's also a movie of the time at the time. I mean, early David Arquette. You've got Luke Perry, R.I.P. I wish I could remember her name off the top of my head because I don't have the ability to look it up. So if you gentlemen want to look it up, then that would be great. But she, I feel like, was such an empowering female character, especially with the show and the way that she was portrayed in the show, that when you go back and watch it, you just realize how poorly women were portrayed in general in order for her to be seen as such a strong female character, in my white man's opinion. I don't know. I'm not here to like preach to anything, but like it really felt like she just had that 90s woman aloofness that they give in movies, and then they gave her superpowers, and that was really it. And that's not, really how it doesn't hold up well. Plus, Joss Whedon, he just doesn't write women. He sucks anyway.
He never got better
he doesn't
at it,
write women well. So like the dialogue is bad. It's fun to watch in that like it's not great but kind of enjoyable. So yeah, it was all right. I gave it a 2.5. Mostly for like nostalgia hits.
That movie was on my short list for this month.
Give it a shot, because I'd love to
I
hear what you
almost
have to
picked
say.
it,
Yeah,
but I went with The Craft instead, which was down the same path.
you should watch Buffy just because like compared like that's an interesting. I mean, The Craft is beyond mine.
Oh, it's way better, but
yeah,
it's
without question.
in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
I think of what they're going for.
Yeah.
But no, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie was something that I didn't even know existed until after the show. I didn't know there was a movie.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with it, so I remember finding that out and being like, "What? And it's a different person? What is this?" So
it's almost like a weird pilot.
Right. It's weird that a movie like that can come out and, do not well and then get a TV show greenlit.
Yeah, Christy Swanson, Donald Sutherland, Paul Rubens, R.I.P., Luke Perry, R.I.P., Hilary Swank, David Arquette.
He's alive.
Stephen Root, who is always a pleasure to see.
Oh, Stephen Root's great. Yeah.
Yeah, he's wonderful. Thomas Jane. Hello.
Oh, the Punisher.
The Punisher. Or Mickey Mantle. So it's got a good cast, too. I mean, again, I'm not saying don't watch it, and I'm not trying to hate on it. It just, for me, it certainly didn't hold up well, especially with the way women are portrayed now.
Yeah, I mean,
how they were.
I think it was really, it was what, 97 or something?
No, I think it was earlier.
94?
The movie was 92.
Yeah.
Oh, wowzers. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, it was just a weird, it was a time where, like you said, the standard was so different for what qualified as like creative, really. I think, because like Joss Whedon's writing really hasn't changed that much since 1992. And I think it took all of us a while to catch on to like, you know what, this is just kind of like campy and cheesy. That's what his thing is. He's really good at cheese, and it was entertaining for a long time. But there's only so many actors can pull off Whedon's cheese, and Nathan Fillion being like the leading candidate. But Nathan Fillion can make anything entertaining.
I
So
did
anyway.
also watch Scooby-Doo, which is great Halloween fare. 5-star movie. I'll hear
Oh,
nothing
yes.
Yeah, I was really disappointed in that as a kid. We'll talk about that some other day.
else. Childhood was sad.
Yeah, clearly we need to add Scooby-Doo to the schedule.
Yeah, definitely. Some
So
point
we
in the
can
future.
work that out.
It's something to talk about. I have there were a lot of like let's 99 to 2002. There were a lot of movies that came out that were targeting David that did not meet David's approval.
Oh.
We're
Well,
talking.
how did you approve, David? Let's move into today's topic.
My pick?
Your pick. The Shining, a classic, a cinematic classic in most people's minds. This is your first time seeing it. You picked it.
Tell
Josh,
us
you
why.
can do your thing. I was just going to
Oh,
transition.
no,
into the
I
movie.
just wanted him to tell us why.
a masterpiece of modern horror, as so dubbed by Stanley Kubrick himself.
Can you do that?
Referring to the book or his own movie? Yeah,
His
that's a good
movie.
question. Okay. Fair.
He was like, that's the tagline. Put that on the poster, and they were like, can you call it a modern? Anyway, so first time ever seeing it, I told you guys 3 or 4 weeks ago that my hope was that this movie would be so iconic that me, absolutely not, David Prock, would not be scared, and I was pretty much right. The movie was. Very different. So no, the reason I picked it is because it's Stephen King, it's Stanley Kubrick. Like these are two like icons of the world of fiction, if you will, cinema, of writing. I'm not like the biggest Stephen King guy, but I appreciate that he has an incredibly long legacy and quite a prolific history of film adaptations of his work. Stanley Kubrick, one of the greatest directors of all time, and many would say that. I've only seen one of Stanley Kubrick's films before this. So I wanted to kind of, it's an excuse to expand that particular blind spot, if you will. So that was one of those was kind of the reasons. And, we have watched several hidden gems in the horror realm. We've watched some franchise films, and I kind of felt like, let's watch another one that's kind of an icon of the genre. So that's why I picked it. As for my thoughts, I thought that it was definitely creepy. It had a lot of moments where they built you up to be scared, only to like cut your strings. You know what I mean? Like you were expecting like, okay, something really scary is about to happen, and they'd be like Tuesday. So like it was a lot of build up, and then like letting you have to stew with that build up you just went through. I thought that it's kind of interesting in its ambiguousness. Like are these ghosts real? Are they just sort of the conjured imaginations of this couple and their son? And when it was over, I really I liked the ending a lot. When it was over, I was like, well, that was pretty good, but I wasn't that scared. But then I tried to go to sleep, and it lingered. It lingered a little bit. And the next day, I was still kind of thinking about it. It was lingering. So really enjoyed it. Jack Nicholson was very creepy. And gotta say, well, you know what? I'll go to you guys. But there's a specific person I want to talk about, because I've seen this movie talked about 100 times without ever seeing it. But there's something that I've never seen brought up, and I want to talk about it in a bit. But I'm interested to see what you guys thought, because I think you guys have seen it before.
Yeah, this movie, listen, I don't remember when I saw this movie. I was probably maybe early teens, maybe younger. Not confident. I was a younger person. But I'm pretty sure that this is one of the reasons why I don't like creepy British children. I'm pretty sure that
I don't think this kid's British.
No, but the twins are.
Oh, okay.
And those kids are creepy. This movie, I think creepy is the best way to explain this. I mean, it is a slow descent into madness, and it just sticks with you, and it lingers, and it really is performance driven. I mean, Shelley Duvall, Jack Nicholson, they're both fantastic. And then you've got everyone else there who deliver their parts well enough to be efficient, in my opinion. I mean, it centers on those two. And then, this time watching it as an adult, for me, it was like, this story is about a narcissist realizing that he is bad at it and he can't handle it. And so he slowly is like dripping into madness because, again, David, maybe one of the things that you were going to talk about is like Shelley Duvall's character throughout this whole movie is just getting shit done. she's taking care of the hotel. She's taking care of her kid. She's doing the best she can to make her marriage work as a woman in the time. And she's just kind of ruling the roost. And then you got Jack over there really, 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 really struggling and not handling it well. But for me, this movie, again, is a classic. I think it holds up well for what it's trying to do. I don't think it's as perfect as it wants to be, according to Stanley. But I think that it deserves its place on its, legacy page.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that Stanley Kubrick thinks that it's a perfect movie. And it makes me wonder if he really says that because of how Stephen King famously hates it. Because I have always thought that was an interesting dynamic, that this is a movie that Stephen King regards as not good, but it is regarded as one of the best Stephen King movies that there is. I gotta say, though, I don't love this movie. And I didn't feel like I loved it anymore upon watching it this time. There's a lot of it I respect from a filmmaking perspective. Like, there's some really cool stuff Stanley Kubrick does, especially with, like, I loved the opening shots of them driving through the mountains. A lot of, I assume, helicopter work or something that just looked really cool. And seeing it on, thank goodness Max put it on 4K, so it wasn't letterboxed. It was full screen. You almost never see that on streaming anymore. Made it so cool to see. So a lot of the shots I loved, the cinematography, the visuals of like the hotel was extremely creepy. The shots, some of the iconic shots, like the blood rushing through the elevator and filling the hotel room, the reveal in the shower of like peeling old lady that Jack thought was this young woman. I like that stuff. Is cool to see in a movie. The story, I don't care, I think, about the story. And I don't really know why, and I've kind of struggled with that for a long time. In a way, I shouldn't, because it's just a movie. But I want to figure out, like, what is it about this movie that I don't care for? I tried to read the book at one point a few years ago, and I didn't finish it because I didn't like it. But the performances are interesting. Jack Nicholson's very good. It's like I like watching what they're doing, and I wish the story was better. If that makes sense. So that's where I land on it. I'm in a weird middle ground of liking what happened, but not liking the execution all the time.
That's very interesting because, from what I've read, it wasn't well liked when it first came out. It was a lot of people said, even, sort of renowned film critics like Ebert and Ropert, they didn't like it. They didn't even review it.
Was nominated for several Razzie Awards as
well.
One, Shelley Duvall won Worst Actress, and it has since been rescinded.
Yeah, because
Academy of Razzies. But
there's been some revelations as to how poorly treated she was on the set, leading to her to maybe give a really authentically stressed out performance. Right. I've heard more about this movie than I actually even could have experienced. Exactly. Like, since this was my first experience, but I've heard so many times about the 127 takes. I've heard about the blood scene flowing down the hallway and how they had to shoot it twice and it took 2 weeks to reset the shot. I've heard about the discourse between Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick, and whether or not they liked each other at all. His the woman who co-wrote the screenplay with Kubrick just crapped all over the book, the novel. Have you guys ever heard this quote from Diane Johnson? I think that's who it is. She said this talking about them rewriting the script We were writing the book for the script, right? She goes, among us, The Shining is not a part of great literature. It's scary, it's effective, and it works without further ado, but it's precisely interesting to see how a very bad book can be very effective. It's quite pretentious, but it's also true that it has less scruples when destroying it, or one has less scruples about destroying it. One is aware that a great work of art is not being destroyed, which is pretty harsh. A pretty harsh review of Stephen King's The Shining. She was like, it's kind of okay that we're messing it up because, like, it's a bad book. It has some scary parts that we can use. Pretty harsh. But, and Kubrick talking about, like, he didn't think Jack Nicholson was right for the role because people would see Jack Nicholson and assume, oh, he's going to go crazy. Just look at it. And I think that's kind of fair because that is what I think when I see Jack Nicholson. This dude is one sleepless night away from going crazy.
But, if you deliver a good performance on an expected descent, then, you do good. And yeah, for me, everybody always talks about Jack Nicholson's performance, and obviously that is the case. Again, this time, I think I saw this movie as a kid, roughly. So my attention to detail, obviously stronger now. And so this time I was paying more attention to the story. And this is the first time that I've ever heard or noticed or paid attention to the story about how Danny got injured and how that plays an effective role throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. And I think that dynamic is something that's really interesting to see why Shelley Duvall is, I mean, obviously, again, because of her treatment, she was like genuinely stressed out and just screaming the whole time. But like, you can see how exacerbated she is. And I feel like any woman, especially of the time, take into context all of the things that a woman and a wife and a mother had to do at the time to keep their family running, to make sure that their abusive alcoholic husband didn't just absolutely come home and annihilate both of them, right? You had to juggle so many hats. And that, I think, understanding that and knowing everything that she is actually going through on her performance, this watch made it more understandable and more like real and like you could feel it for me. And like, I really appreciated her performance a lot. Whereas again, I think that, in the past she's been it's been panned for her just kind of like running and screaming and being kind of breathless throughout the whole movie. And really understanding at the core that this is a story about, a kid that was abused and a family that's on the brink. And a writer, again, who is a genuine, seemingly narcissist and has a problem and is facing his issues of, what do? I have to do you know all of the pressures that I'm going through into my descent into madness, while she's carrying everything on her back to make sure that he can have his privacy and his silence and sit in his den and be by himself. And, it's that for me that I appreciated this time. It wasn't necessarily the scares. I think that story was, again, as an adult, seeing it and hearing it and seeing how it breaks down throughout the movie and how it impacts everything was really interesting.
Yeah. It's definitely not what I expected in a lot of ways. And there's also there's an element of like, it doesn't feel like everything fits together perfectly about it. And I think Kubrick talked about that as being something he liked about it, was that he didn't want everything to just perfectly flow together so that everybody could be all, I guess, congratulatory with like, oh, did you notice this and that and how this does that? Like, he kind of likes that, like, things don't, like, room 237 doesn't really have much to do with the, with what's going on in the ballroom, or whatever. Like, these things don't all connect in this like perfect little understandable way. Something I wanted to talk about, because in all the years that I have heard people talk about The Shining, and I have heard people talk about all the crazy things about the set or about the working conditions or the performances, I have never heard anybody talk about the thing that surprised me the most, because the characters I've known these characters through osmosis so well that I kind of had a hard time really connecting with a lot of them. So I connected with this character that I'd literally never seen in any media. And that is the character of Dick Halloran, played by Scatman Crothers. Scatman was great in this, and like he was so cool. He plays this cook who also has The Shining, and he talks to Danny about his gift, and he gets a psychic vision from Danny telling him something's wrong, and he tries to come to the rescue. And I was actually like, I was like, I've never seen anybody talk about this element of the movie. It's a whole other half of the movie that I've never seen special clips of. I've seen, special clips of this and that, and Jack Nicholson doing this, and hey, have you ever noticed that this symbol in the background? I've never once seen anybody talk about how great a performance Scatman Crothers gives in this. I was really impressed by that. I don't know if that's a little weird to bring up, but that's something that stood out to me as a first-time viewer.
Interesting, because I mean that's essentially who Groundskeeper Willie is in the version of The Simpsons of this, The Shining. So I mean, if you haven't seen the pop culture of that, that's the connection there that you might make.
I'm gonna tonight now.
Oh, you should go. You should definitely go watch The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror Shining version of this. It's a classic, absolute masterpiece of the rip off of this. It's wonderful, wonderful, 5 stars.
Tonight it happens.
It's probably on Max as well.
D+, Disney Plus.
Yeah, David, I think that's an interesting. I think that it is a pretty good performance. I think that he delivers a lot of empathy. He connects in a sweet way, and yeah, whenever he goes down, it's devastating.
Yeah, I was genuinely upset that spoiler alert, he's the only one that dies. And well, technically, I guess technically Jack dies as well. Midway through, I asked my wife, I said, what's the name of Jack Nicholson's character? And she goes, Jack. And I go, that makes it easy. I can remember that now.
Oh yeah, right.
Jack is Jack.
No, I think that's a good. I think that's a good observation too. I think he's a good character, and you don't hear a lot about that character. It's usually Jack Nicholson, to be honest. Mm-hmm. You hear a lot of "Here's Johnny" and "Red Rum," which got to a point where it annoyed the piss out of me. And I think that also kind of sucked me out of it a little bit. Where I was like, okay, why does he have to put on that annoying voice when he says it?
To distinguish the difference between Danny and Tony.
Right, and I get that. But I also just knew the difference at that point.
Just a real quick sidestep while we're talking about Danny. I started watching today Dr. Sleep. Have you guys seen Dr. Sleep? Do you know?
I haven't. Can you believe it's almost 4 years old already?
Okay, I know. And so I feel like it's one of those movies. It came out right before the pandemic, I think.
Yeah.
And people, I think, were interested in it, and then I think people thought it was going to be scary. And then people found out it was like a sequel to The Shining, and they were like, "What? It's going to be really scary." And then I don't think it was scary, and I think people were disappointed in it. And so I walked into it relatively blind, not knowing much about it, not having much expectations. It's long; it's 2.5 hours, but it does pick up on Danny and his life kind of after going through all of this. And it explains so far, again, I haven't finished it yet, but it explains a lot that you may not see or understand about The Shining and how it works. And it's been super interesting so far. Again, I don't necessarily say that I would call it scary so far, but it's slow. It's got a good cast, and they all deliver an interesting performance. And it gives me a little more that I might want to know about how this whole thing works. And so it's been interesting. Just real quick.
Yeah, I've heard that it's a better adaptation of the Dr. Sleep book than The Shining is of the Shining book, but still kind of a good sequel to either. Yeah. Is kind of what I've heard. And I thought about recommending that, but I'd never seen The Shining, so I was like, well, I got to see one before I see the other.
Yeah, it would be strange for us to do a sequel without.
But an interesting element of this, as I watching it the first time, is that a lot of the things I didn't know, like I didn't know like what happens with the twins. I always just see the twins in the hallway. Didn't know what happened. Like I was like, where do they lead Danny? What do they take him to? And that really doesn't. They kind of like have their moment and then they're just gone. And there are a couple other instances like that. The idea of this sort of like almost possession kind of thing of this, this groundskeeper who's always there or whatever, right? That sort of storyline. But one of the more interesting things is that the movie just sort of ends. it doesn't like, there was a scene I read that was cut that showed Danny and Wendy getting to a hospital and talking to doctors and police, and them saying something like, we couldn't find Jack's body or something like that. But they cut that after the movie had already gone out. They decided, they retroactively went and said, cut that last 6 minutes or whatever. So the movie, you see Danny and them get away, you see Jack's body, and that's just it. It's just over, which is kind of fascinating to me, that there's not really like a resolution, a place to wind down. It's like, here's the climax, and you're done. What'd you guys think of that?
I wasn't satisfied with it, I guess is what I'll say. I don't know what would have satisfied me at that point, because like I said, I was struggling. I struggle with the story anyway. It really just has to end with. It just has to end with Jack. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it was fine. I don't even have much to add to it.
Yeah, the ending is not the strongest part of this movie in any way, shape, or form. I've never fully, to be honest with you, I've never fully understood the ending where they zoom in on the picture and he's there and then it's him again. And I'm kind of like, what am I supposed to take away from this? This doesn't really connect to any of this that's kind of happened. The part where the ghost just kind of unlocks the freezer and lets Jack out, I was like, that seems like a cop out. I mean, like,
that was so I've been doing a lot of reading over the last few days about all this. I'm convinced nobody knows what that freaking last picture is supposed to be. Even Kubrick can say he knows, and that it's for us to never find out. I don't even think he knows. I think they were just like, now what if this happened? Yeah, oh great, do that. Who knows what it means? But I also think I do appreciate that what Kubrick said, something Kubrick said is that he wanted there to be this uncertainty about whether or not these ghosts are real, right? Whereas in The Shining, it's apparently in the book, it's plainly obvious the ghosts are real. That's what the book's about. It's about ghosts, right? And this, he wanted there to be some questioning of whether or not these ghosts are real, or if it's Jack's imagination, if it's Danny's imagination, if they're all just kind of through this extreme isolation, just starting to visualize their fears, right? And I like that he said what he wanted to do, though, was leave just a few things to make you, the audience, question it even a little bit more. Like, how does that door unlock? And he said that he hoped that if he introduced that late enough into the movie, that you would almost miss it. And you'd have to think back, wait a minute, was the ghost, wait a minute, how did he get out? You know what I mean? So I remember thinking it towards the end myself, thinking, wait a minute, how did he get out of that room? But yeah, so I like that as trying to play with the audience a little bit. But it is like, sometimes I'm just wondering, like, were they rewriting as they were going, and that's just how they fix it later? Or is that really, like, who, it's...
If at any point in time I was supposed to question if the ghosts were real or not, I didn't.
So do you think they're real? Or do you think they're not real?
I was led to believe that they are. So there were some things that I just didn't fully understand how they were working. Like, again, Jack's interaction with the groundskeeper in the bar, and like how everybody kind of knew him and how it tied in and stuff. Yeah, but I think that the more interesting dynamic, if presented that way, is, there should have been some kind of tension as to whether, again, with the going back to the story that is driving all of this about Danny and him being hurt, there should have been more tension built around whether or not Jack was doing this stuff or if the ghosts were real. That was never presented to me, and if that was what he was shooting for, then I'd say he failed miserably, because that was never a thing that I thought. I never once thought that Jack was doing anything. I know that he had done it, but at no point in time during this time frame did they present me with any evidence that got me close to thinking that Jack did it, other than he has done it before in the past. And that's not good enough. It may have been back then.
Yeah, to me, when you introduce a supernatural element like The Shining, of course I believe the ghosts are real. Mm. Also, like, I just do.
Yeah. So
I thought they were real as well.
Well, that's the thing, is like, I have it's kind of hard to figure out when a movie becomes sort of a cult classic and becomes sort of analyzed, I think, to the level that like The Shining has been analyzed. Because I, over the last few days, have read everything from The Shining as a metaphor about the treatment of African Americans to the treatment of Native Americans to the treatment of it's a metaphor for the Holocaust. Like The Shining is literally a metaphor for any bad thing that's ever happened, right? And I'm not to say that any of those analyses are invalid. I'm just saying I have now read several different analyses that make it a metaphor for various different things. But I think when you get to that point, it is kind of hard to now go back and retroactively figure out like what was like did someone along the way say, hey, I don't think the ghosts are real, and that just kind of spread as an urban legend when this thing couldn't be viewed as a DVD over and over again or on Max over and over again. And so, if you only got to see The Shining once and then 10 years later you finally saw it again, you were like, wait a minute, I thought this or I thought that. You sort of create, Mandela effect, your own versions of it, and certain versions spread through classroom talk, things like that. So I don't know. That's all I'm saying is like it is watching it. There were times where it definitely seemed like people were just going a little crazy. They were super stressed out. They were, but also I think Gary, you picked up on the abuse element with Danny and how that definitely seems to be an undercurrent that I think more people have picked up on over time as being maybe more of the real story underneath. And it might be worth watching again just to kind of pick up on those things.
Yeah. Again, I think this movie lives in the moments that are successful, like the iconic moments that it has created over time. I think that is more where this movie relies. And again, I do think that the performances help. I think that the slow descent into madness is kind of like, maybe not the best comparison, but like a Paranormal Activity, what they were trying to give you in their slow burn delivery with like these tense moments that may or may not deliver something, but makes you question what's around the corner every step of the way. And I think that kind of creepiness and unsettlingness is what lingers, David. I think this movie does just sit with you for a long time. And I think that it still is successful at.
Can I ask you guys, because you may have thoughts, Josh, I assume based on your previous statements that you probably have no thoughts about it. What the hell was with that bear man? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What's with that weird furry scene?
I don't know.
Sequence.
And why was he doing what he was doing?
What was that?
Why was he doing that?
There's like, and as we were talking about it, I looked up to see like, oh, someone smart must have come up with some metaphor for what this is about.
I'd much rather have a discussion about is the bear man real, not the ghost.
Nobody really knows what this bear sequence is about. It's very short, very brief, but it appears that a bear man is performing sexual acts on a very posh British looking guy.
And neither of them seem thrilled about it.
No, the bear seems quite upset. But the closest we can come to any sort of analysis that has come about is kind of tied to what Garrett's talking about, is that actually Jack's abuse of Danny goes deeper than just physical abuse and goes all the way down to sexual abuse. That's what they believe is there, because if you watch the movie, there are quite a few bear motifs around Danny, either on his shirts, on his bed, on his he has like a picture of bears somewhere around his bed at home. And then there are also at one point, Jack, when he's laying on his bed, has a cover of Playgirl that has and people have pointed out that one of the articles on the cover says, "Why do parents have sex with their children?" or something like that. So there are people who are picking up that maybe Jack has been sexually abusing Danny, and that's what that little vision. And that Wendy, the mom, has been repressing that and claiming it was simply, physical abuse of pulling his arm out of stretch or something like that. And in that moment, she sees, an lurid vision of that in the form of Bear Man.
I gotta say, whether that holds true or not,
we'll never.
Right, but the attention to detail that's present enough to allow people to continue to have conversations like that for so long, it does make me understand why the movie is so well respected. Mm-hmm. There are things about it that are very good, and I just think it's not for me.
Okay. Well,
That's all I can come to the conclusion of is like, it's not that it's bad. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, any movie that can inspire that kind of conversation about what does this mean? What did that mean? Are the ghosts real? Is this real? Is interesting.
What else, boys? Anything else before we get into the box office?
I had a fun time watching this with my wife because she's seen it several times. And when it comes to a movie that's kind of older like this, or I'm feeling a little bit more confident when watching it, I kind of try to make a few more jokes. So at one point, the hotel owner, he's like, isolation can be very troubling for people. And Jack Nicholson's like, I don't imagine it'll be troubling for me, or something like that. We'll love it. And I'm like, I looked at my wife and I go, I don't think he's going to have an easy time with it. And she laughed and she goes, you know what happens, right? And I go, of course I do. What am I going to do? And then there was one point later, I can't remember what it was. Now I've forgotten it, but I was just making fun of Jack said something crazy. And I was like, I got a bad feeling about Jack. And it's just so kind of obvious what's about to happen. I guess even if I had never heard anything about this movie, it's kind of very obvious what's about to happen to these people.
And I'll also say there is some truth to what you said earlier about the idea of Jack Nicholson being too crazy seeming for this role, because like he does seem crazy before he actually turns.
Seems like a total dick before he turns. I'll tell you that.
At no point seems like a normal person.
No.
So I get that criticism, and especially in that scene, it's really evident because I remember thinking, this man is really doing everything in his power to tell him not to take this job.
Yeah.
And he's like, I love it.
And he's like,
someone was murdered in the bedroom. Oh yeah.
Ooh, sounds great.
That kind of stuff.
You know, yeah. I mean, like he's literally sounds like he could not wait to get this job in this hotel. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe he's always been there. Who knows? But, King suggested Martin Sheen for the role. He also suggested John Voight or Michael Moriarty. Can you picture?
I don't think we should turn to Stephen King for casting anything. All of those choices.
I don't necessarily.
You don't think Martin Sheen would be good?
I think Martin Sheen could do it. I think
maybe,
that would be
but
an
I just don't see
choice.
him in that kind of role either.
And that's because he's your president.
He is my president.
Now, according to
his son, I could see.
Charlie Sheen would be.
Yeah,
no, that's the same problem.
That son.
That's the same problem as Jack Nicholson. He'd be saying like, whatever, whenever the guy says the place is isolated.
So John Voight has just lived that over time. I mean, he really has been the slow descent into madness that this movie embodies. So, I mean, I guess I could see him doing it, other than I don't want him to. But like, he's literally done it.
So
he is now like the peeling old woman. I think at the end of I think that's what he's morphed into.
Everything I know about John Voight essentially is the episode of Seinfeld where George thinks he buys John Voight's
car
and Holes.
Yep.
Holes.
The Disney movie Holes.
Oh, what a great movie, Holes.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about this. Earlier this year when we did Game Night Month, we watched a movie that had a big reference to The Shining, Ready Player One.
Ready Player One.
It's partly what inspired me to pick it this year.
And that was choice by Spielberg and them, because in the book Ready Player One, the movie they go into is War Games, and they change it to The Shining for the film. So that was also done on purpose.
Yeah.
So Kubrick wanted Nicholson from the beginning, is what I've read, but there were a few other actors he has named or have been named over time that he did consider. Those include Robert De Niro.
Okay.
Harrison Ford, and it's hard to believe, but Robin Williams.
Oh dear,
he could do it.
Robin could do it.
Honestly, all three of those guys could have done it. I think Robin would have been the one that would I think it would have irrevocably changed his career,
potentially,
especially if the movie had become such a cult classic as it did with Nicholson. I think it would have been everybody would have seen Robin Williams as like a person who has inherently terrifying elements to him.
I think he took his turn into drama and horror exactly when he should have.
Definitely. Definitely.
But anyway, Harrison Ford would have been cool.
Yeah.
De Niro is great at going calm to crazy, so that would have been good, especially back then.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely.
All right. Well, Do you have any other fun facts about The Shining and the casting before we head into this box office?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. I'm happy to say that I wasn't that scared, but I have thought about it a lot. It has stuck with me.
It's not a movie I find particularly scary either, but I don't fault it for that. Really.
Scary imagery, but nothing to... there's a stillness to it. It's a very still movie, and I think that's because it's one of the first movies to use Steadicam. But like the movie isn't like a jarring or shaky. It's very still, and I appreciate that. But I could talk about some box office here real quick. Not a lot of details to say because The Shining opened Memorial Day weekend, May 23rd, 1980, in just 10 theaters, bringing in $622,000 in its opening weekend. That's the third highest opening for a movie in less than 10 theaters or 10 theaters or less. I think only behind the first Star Wars and something else. I can't remember. It was the number 3 movie of that weekend. Only 3 movies have reported numbers according to Box Office Mojo. The number 1 movie that weekend was Star Wars Episode 5: The Empire Strikes Back, and The Gong Show the movie. So that's your weekend at the box office there. For the year of 1980, the number 1 movie of the year was The Empire Strikes Back, bringing in $209 million at the domestic box office. The number 2 movie was 9 to 5, starring Dolly Parton, Jane Fonda, isn't it? Maybe some other people.
Great cast name, 9 to 5. Yeah.
A great movie, great song, everything, great play. Number 3, Stir Crazy, starring Richard Pryor and Gene
Wilder.
Hackman?
Yeah, Hackman and Siskel were the 2 names that jumped into my head, and I was like, no, neither of those 2. The other one, Gene Wilder. And then at number 5, Any Which Way You Can. The Shining was the number 14 movie in 1980 with a final domestic total of $44 million. It did play overseas because, as I was reading, that there is an alternate cut that was shown in Europe. Mostly, they cut out the scene with the doctor at the beginning, and the scene where Scatman Crothers talks to that guy, where he's like, "Hey, man, there's some assholes up there, and I got to go get them." Like they cut that scene. They cut the scene with the doctor towards the beginning of the movie. But so I don't really know what the international numbers are. That number is not given here. But The Shining, $44 million in the United States, just behind Urban Cowboy, John Voight. So we'll leave it there and go to the Letterboxd game.
All right. Yes, it is time for us all to guess what we think the Letterboxd community has rated The Shining. First, let's talk about some of my favorite reviews for this movie on Letterboxd. We got 3.5 stars from Jamie. Says, something in this movie happens. Some guy who just loves going absolutely crazy on the cello. That's my kid. 5 stars. I maintain that the scene with the guy in the bear costume is just something random and nobody in the film had any idea what it was supposed to mean.
Exactly.
5 stars from Abigail. If it was me, I would have simply not gone crazy. And then finally, 5 stars. A tuxedo-clad man with a furry fetish has the best night of his life, rudely interrupted by a marital dispute.
I'm glad more people want to know about the bear.
Yes.
It caught me off guard, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about Scatman Crothers or that stinking bear man. And here we go.
So those were funny, but there was some 5 stars in there too. So, And we know this movie. We talked about how it was not really loved at first, and is now considered a cult classic and one of the best films ever made. I think it's on AFI's top 100 movies list. Mm-hmm. So, what do we think?
Yeah, Garrett, you're in last place. It's up to you.
I am gonna go higher.
Okay.
I'm gonna be at like a 4.1.
Oh, that's a good guess.
That is
Josh?
a good guess. That is a good guess. I'm gonna go higher.
Ooh.
Higher, further, faster, baby, or whatever Captain Marvel says. and I'm gonna go with 4.3.
That's a good. I think that's a good call and raise there, or check raise, whatever you. I don't know how poker the term.
Yeah. I'm gonna go lower, and I'm gonna say a solid 4.0.
Okay.
I
think we all are pretty sure it's a 4 or better.
We have all seemed confident in that. So
we need a tiebreaker to get ready.
We got a 4.1 and we got a 4.3 as our guesses here. I can say that David won't need the tiebreaker, so you're good there. And we have a direct hit. And it always feels so anticlimactic when I say that it's me.
You gotta own it. You gotta celebrate.
4.3. I know.
Oh, wow.
I gotta say, it always feels like, oh yeah, the guy who announces won. I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he didn't know.
Right. But yeah, it is a 4.3 based on 1.3 million ratings. Big.
That's a lot of ratings.
Big watch over at Letterboxd.
This is definitely a film fan movie, friends.
Yeah, I bet it's high on the list of
I'm glad to finally check it off my list.
rewatched movies. Yeah.
Congratulations, David. You made it through.
I never had it logged, so I'm excited to have it logged now.
Yeah. I usually only log movies when I've seen them. Or, well, that's not true. I logged a whole ton of movies when I first got on the app because I have literally nothing better to do. So, Josh, that brings you up to 11 on the year with that direct hit.
You're getting
9
closer.
wins, 11 points. You're only behind me by 4. So it's getting exciting.
The comeback kid.
It's getting exciting down the stretch.
We are only in October.
Miracle on ice.
We got 2 months left.
I think.
Anything can happen.
Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, I'm sorry. You're at 12. I miscounted.
Even better.
You're 12. So now you're only 3 behind me.
Wow.
Garrett,
okay.
pulling up at last with 8, but
I'm not
2 direct hits and he's back in this.
Yeah, I'm not that far out.
That's the thing. It's a close race here, and it's getting competitive at the end. And I like that.
I haven't won since Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Whoa.
That was a little while ago. That was back.
Now.
Yes, that was back at the beginning of Animation August. So we're getting closer.
That this is happening is because we changed the rules to start the season, and then we changed it when I came back because you just kept winning.
Well, you just started.
We had to give the last place people the advantage. Usually, the people who are winning get the advantage, but the last place people needed a handicap.
I really thought that going first was my handicap because I was like, because they can just box me out. They can just pick all the other sides. Yeah. So, but I really, honestly, after I said 4.0, I was so nervous it was going to be 4.2. So that's great. So I look forward to putting some other Kubrick movies on my on my watch list in the future. I've now seen 2. I saw this and Full Metal Jacket. Those are the only 2 Kubrick films I've seen. I need to catch up on the rest. But I'm going to today give The Shining 4 stars.
4 stars from David. Okay.
I will do the same.
4 stars from Garrett. Okay. I'm going to give it a respectful 3.
There you go. There you go.
I can't get it up to 4 just because of my personal lack of enjoyment, but I do think it is a very well made movie and deserves a lot of the attention that it gets. But also, there's some, you mentioned the Shelley Duvall, Stanley Kubrick stuff. There's some stuff about it that has aged poorly. That just kind of takes some of the fun out of it. So 3 stars for me, which will have us average a little lower than Letterboxd, but that's okay sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes a big movie's got to get put in check.
Exactly.
And we're here to do that.
So we have completed all of our picks for So Many Scares, which means that we have one more left, which is going to come from you, the people watching or listening to the show. So be sure to check us out on our social channels. You can find links to those at SoManySequels.com, but just search So Many Sequels on Instagram, on TikTok, on Threads or Facebook, and send us a message, tag us in something, let us know what movie you think we should do for the last So Many Scares of the month, whether you want to scare the crap out of us whether you want to treat us to a nice, maybe family-friendly Halloween movie.
Oh my God, I haven't watched Casper yet this year. That'd be great if I could watch some Casper.
Casper would be great, and we've never
Love
covered it.
Casper. I mentioned Scooby-Doo. I'd watch that again.
Yes. So send us those suggestions. We're also going to put some polls up from some of those suggestions and have people vote. So look for those probably on our Instagram story over the next week or so. And we hope to find out very soon what you're going to subject us to, good or bad.
Yeah.
So again, do that at somanysequels.com. Grab the links there and let us know what we should do. And that wraps up the show, really. After So Many Scares, we'll have the rest. We'll finish out the rest of the year strong, going into November and December for our Christmas movie month. So many Santas. So there's still stuff to look forward to before the year ends. So be sure you subscribe too. Subscribe in your podcast app of choice or on YouTube. You can subscribe to us there. That's all. We'll see you all next time for the final scare of the month.
Ah!